Sometimes a movie does everything it says on the tin. Take Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings trilogy, for instance. It adapted J.R.R. Tolkien's literary saga as faithfully as possible and kept surprise deviations to a minimum. And that's perfectly fine. The fans were expecting to see an epic fantasy adventure with large-scale battles, a ring-shaped MacGuffin, and a few hobbits here and there, and that's exactly what Jackson delivered. There are, however, those occasions when movies end up being 2.5 hours of pure WTF madness. Times when the universe's collective expectations were way off the mark. Sometimes this is great, a case of a cinematic underdog story defying the odds and reaching a level of excellence nobody thought possible, but often the reverse is true. I'm Josh from Whatculture.com, and these are movies that turned out nothing like you were expecting. Super Mario Bros. When Rocky Morton and Annabelle Jankel were hired to bring video game franchise Super Mario Bros. To cinema in the early 90s, fans had no idea what to expect. The end result, however, was still something nobody could have predicted. Nintendo's twee world of mushrooms, turtle shells, and bright colors became a Blade Runner-esque dystopia, and a Briton and a Latino were cast as our Italian-American leads. Nothing about Super Mario Bros. Resembled the games, beyond the core concept of having two plumbers rescue a princess from the clutches of evil in a fantasy world. One of its biggest deviations was casting the late Dennis Hopper as reptilian baddie King Koopa, who appears for some reason in human form in the film. But it was the scene where Bob Hoskins as Mario plants his head right between the breasts of a rotund, leather-clad woman in a dino nightclub that killed every fan's childhood. Mario, apparently, in this universe, is a lads sesh monster. Even after a plate load of super mushrooms, this doesn't resemble Mario Brothers, and that's kinda why it's great.
How's it going, everyone? You know what time of year it is. It's Black Friday week, it's busy, it's overwhelming, but lucky for you, Whatculture has trolled through all the Black Friday deals to bring you the very best offers for all your favorite streaming platforms, including Prime Video and Apple TV. Save yourself some money by checking out the link in the description and grab yourself a bargain today. Now, back to the video.
Prometheus. Moviegoers can be forgiven for thinking that an Alien prequel might actually, have some aliens in it. And when Prometheus arrived with absolutely none, alright, bar one in the final scene that's kinda like a xenomorph, the fans were left flummoxed. In all truth, there's plenty of extraterrestrial life forms in Ridley Scott's movie, and you know what, I actually think the film is nowhere near as bad as people say it is, but everyone was expecting the kind of alien that bursts from human chests, bleeds corrosive acid everywhere, and kills anything that moves. Fans were also bracing themselves for some insight into the enduring mysteries of the alien universe, but left theaters with yet more unanswered questions. The reason Prometheus proved so divisive is that it wasn't the Alien prequel the diehards were after. Fans wanted answers and the ends to meet, rather than a lecture on theology, however fascinating it might have been. Rise of the Planet of the Apes. Rise of the Planet of the Apes is a classic case of a movie exceeding expectations, even if its name is still a complete mouthful. It was a prequel nobody really asked for that had big shoes to fill in the shape of the classic original, and a tarnished brand to repair after Tim Burton made a monkey out of the franchise a decade earlier. Needless to say, nobody was expecting it to be any good. Never mind launch one of the best franchises of the 2010s. But director Rupert Wyatt delivered a blockbuster with heart, soul, and freaking amazing special effects. After the trailers hit, film fans were expecting a visual spectacle, but they got so much more. A touching man-ape bond between Simeon Caesar and James Franco's good-natured scientist is the lifeblood of the story, and the spectacular CGI is merely the icing on the banana cake. Man of Steel. Truth, justice, and the American way. Those are the ideals that we expect Superman to embody, and while the true meaning of the latter element is a little blurry these days, you won't find any of the above in Man of Steel. The last son of Krypton has always been a clean-cut hero, full of sunny optimism and altruism. He's the day to Batman's night. However, you wouldn't know that if you purely knew him from Zack Snyder's DC Extended Universe launch vehicle. Right at the foot of the list of things fans were not expecting to see in Man of Steel comes snapping a bad guy's neck and leveling half of Metropolis with zero regard for the collateral damage. The only thing more surprising the filmmakers could have included would have been like if Clark just straight up murdered Lois Lane or something like that. Snyder likes to deconstruct his heroes, but this approach is a better fit for some rather than others. As an archetypal good guy, Superman isn't a wholly great candidate for this treatment, and as is is often the case with Snyder, it felt like he just didn't quite get the character at all. The Dark Tower. Stephen King's mind-bending fantasy horror western hybrid thing, The Dark Tower, should have been so good. It genuinely had the potential to be cinema's next Lord of the Rings, if only it had been given the kind of careful treatment the fans were banking on. There were claims that the saga is unfilmable, but nobody was expecting its in-depth story and layered characters to arrive on a screen stripped to their bare bones. However, Sony Pictures made some pretty bad calls during The Dark Tower's production, such as reducing the runtime to little more than an hour and a half and attempting to make a sequel to the books rather than simply adapt them. It ended up being a confusing, disjointed mess of a film that bore only a passing resemblance to King's beloved novels, and it has probably killed Sony's ambitions to tell more stories in this universe. It could have been someone, it could have been a contender, but it ended up being made essentially for nobody. Fantastic Four. If there's ever a superhero film that should be family-friendly, colourful, and fun, it's the Fantastic Four. That's what everyone was kind of expecting when Fox announced it was taking another stab at bringing Marvel's first family to the big screen. But, of course, this was the early 2010s, and Chris Nolan's Batman movies were still more talked about than the MCU. So Fox thought, actually, let's just do that instead. When the trailers came in all dark and serious, expectations shifted, but they were still cautiously high nevertheless. Josh Trank, the man who brought us the excellent found footage flick Chronicle, was handling the project after all. It seemed to be in safe hands. But not only did the final product bear no resemblance to the Fantastic Four, it appeared to actively shun all things good and decent in the world. This was a gloomy comic adaptation utterly devoid of anything positive. So bad that it actually made the previous Fantastic Four movies look competent. Now, who among you saw that coming? Cabin in the Woods. Pretty much nobody had any idea just how subversive Cabin in the Woods was going to be when it first came out. Sure, fans assumed that there'd be some kind of twist involved, as it couldn't have been as run-of-the-mill as its premise indicated. But nobody expected it to have anything that would elevate it above being an alright slasher film. Fortunately, the marketing successfully hid its biggest secrets, and just when the audiences were rolling their eyes at the slasher cliches before them, the movie mutated into one of the most original horrors of its generation. Stereotypical teens and done-to-death backdrops quickly made way for force fields, a chamber of horrors containing every monster pop culture has ever dreamed up, and sacrifices to appease the dark gods of old. The Cabin in the Woods trailer only hinted at the tip of the iceberg, positioning the film as a generic slasher movie with a trick or two up its sleeve. Who'd have thought it was hiding a full black magic emporium up there though? It's just a shame Cabin in the Woods didn't embrace one more horror cliche by spawning any sequels. The Guest. In The Guest, Spencer and Laura Peterson's Marine son Caleb is killed in Afghanistan, and while they struggle to cope with their loss, the arrival of his former squad mate and best friend David Collins seems to soften the blow. David comes across as a kind, charming man dedicated to helping the family, as The Guest appears to set itself up as one of those films, you know, the ones uplifting, positive, and all that jazz. I mean, he's played by Dan Stevens. Who wouldn't trust and love him unconditionally? But things do take a turn for the darker when David helps his fallen comrade's younger brother out with a bully problem, leaving the original aggressors with, well, a terrible hiding. After a blossoming romance with Caleb's sister turns fatal attraction, it becomes apparent that The Guest isn't the heartwarming lesson in love and loss it was made out to be. The movie arrived on the scene to little fanfare, and its subject matter and endgame caught everyone off guard. Cloud Atlas. After The Matrix and Speed Racer, fans were expecting the Wachowskis to put some kind of zany, adrenaline-soaked spin on their adaptation of Cloud Atlas, but no. That's not what we got. It was admittedly an ambitious take on David Mitchell's beloved book about life, the universe, and reincarnation, but this was the last thing anyone was expecting from the directorial duo. With a stellar cast led by Tom Hanks and Jim Broadbent, many were tipping it for Oscar success, though somewhere between its clunky editing and excessive 3-hour runtime, it failed to secure a single nomination. With the Wachowskis since returning to more familiar territory with 2015's Jupiter Ascending and Netflix series Sense8, it feels as though Cloud Atlas happened in a strange alternate universe. One that I fully embrace, however, because even when they're not great, the Wachowskis make some undeniably interesting projects. The Grey. Probably because it came along at a time where every single film Liam Neeson was starring in was a 2-bit taken derivative, everyone was expecting The Grey to be yet another half-baked action romp. Having Joe Carnahan's name attached didn't really help matters either, as they're the kind of movies he specializes in, but anyone who actually went to see it soon realized that the taken comparisons to The Grey do not apply. Neeson had to use an entirely different set of skills when his plane crashed in a remote Alaskan wilderness, and a grueling tale of man versus nature ensued. The Grey is emotionally charged and full of subtext about the indomitable human spirit, holds one of Neeson's most memorable performances post-Batman Begins, and arguably Carnahan's greatest cinematic accomplishment to date. However, everyone just expected it to be the daft movie when Neeson punches a bunch of wolves in the face, but it was so much more.